Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel where I'm sharing stories from the imaginary world that I started when I was 9 years old and have been continuing ever since. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Chutasian months of the year, how they came to be and what the names of the months mean. Through this, we'll be talking a bit about the history of Chutasia and Chutaland and also a bit about the climate and astronomy of Chutasia. So let's do a recap for anyone who's new or anyone that's just needs a recap, because we all need a recap sometimes. So what is Chutasia? Chutasia is the world that my stuffed toy hedgehog Chutney comes from, and in Chutasia it's where all the Chutasian hedgehogs live. Chutasia consists of 11 islands, and the largest island in the center is called Chutaland, and it is home to the Chutasian royal family. And of course, Chutney is a princess of Chutasia, so that's also where her family live in the royal palace. In the last video that I talked about the days of the week, I introduced you to the island called Oriziko, and I explained that the current era in Chutasia started when a small number of teachers, craftsmen and spiritual leaders left Oriziko and came to Chutaland and started teaching the hedgehogs in Chutaland trades and crafts. And part of that was the calendar that they helped the Chutalandians devise. So we're going to continue that today, talking about the months of the year. I have said in the past that my paracosm is, some of it is like light-hearted jokes and silly stories, and some of it is like quite complicated, or maybe not complicated, but detailed and in-depth and layers of meaning. And that is certainly, today's video has a bit more of this kind of layers of meaning type thing. So I do have some notes because I don't want to get it wrong, because I wouldn't be doing the Chutasians justice if I got this wrong. So let's remind ourselves that the Chutasian calendar consists of 10 months, and each of those 10 months has 5 weeks in it, and each week has 6 days. So then you end up with months that have 30 days, and 10 months equals 300 days in a year. Now, I have said in the previous video, that's a bit, Chutney, that's a bit perfect. I'm not sure I quite believe that that calendar is very convenient. Very simple, it's very convenient. I'm not totally sure it works. And there is a bit of a discussion in Chutasia, or really, like, this is my intuition. I don't know if anyone in Chutasia has really caught onto it, but I wonder whether, in the past video, I talked about the War of the Potato, and the War of the Potato occurs when the potato crop on the island of Chutaland, which is their most important crop, because hedgehogs love potatoes. Well, Chutasian hedgehogs love potatoes. And they find that their potato crop is not as bountiful as it normally is, and some of the crops completely fail. And that starts a war, essentially. You can look at the other video for more information. Now, I have a little bit of an inkling that maybe if you're using this calendar to determine when you plant and harvest your potatoes, it could be that perhaps the reason why the potato crop has failed is because this calendar no longer fits with the seasons in Chutasia. Either it's a bit like they need a leap day or something, and over time it's been moved out of position, and then you kind of end up that the potatoes are just not growing because they're being planted at the complete wrong time of the year. I mean, this is something that the Chutasian hedgehogs would do. Or it could be that there was some kind of, what do you call it? Astronomical event? Astrological? No, it's not astrological. Astronomical event? I'll put it on the screen if that's right. That maybe the planet that Chutasia is on has kind of like shifted, and the calendar that previously worked for about 170 years doesn't work. So that would be my little bit of a hunch about what caused the potato crop to fail in Chutaland, and also perhaps it gives us something to think about with this like very, very perfectly organized calendar. Although, I mean, some of the things in Chutasia are kind of silly, aren't they? So, I mean, it is possible that you just have a perfect 300-day year. It's possible. So I have mentioned there that Chutasia is on a planet. The planet that Chutasia is on is called Petahog, or at least that's what the Chutasians call it. They call it Petahog. And there are other realms that are on this planet. The one that we know of is called Chusella. And you can look at previous videos for a bit of information about Chusella. And this planet Petahog, it orbits, well, let me preface what I'm going to say. The Chutasian hedgehogs are not particularly interested in astronomy, and a lot of the information that they do have is incomplete, and a lot of the information they have looks like it might have come from other realms or from a long time ago. And so what I'm going to say next might seem a bit unbelievable. So Petahog orbits 2 suns, right? And they also have 2 or 3 moons, depending on how you classify a moon. But you might, if any of you out there are kind of like scientific and you're like, oh, hold on, it orbits 2 suns, it has 3 moons. What kind of planet is this? Well, first of all, this is in another dimension, right? So maybe it's different in their dimension. And also, you know, thinking about the knowledge that the Chutasians have, they believe that they orbit 2 suns, and they believe that they have 2 or 3 moons. What the truth is, we do not know. So they call their suns the first sun and the second sun. And they call the moons the moon 1, the moon 2, and the moon final. And those moons have silent underscores in their names. Chutney. Apparently that's what they call them. So let's talk about the months of the year. So the 10 Chutasian months are split into 5 pairs, and the pairs kind of mirror each other in the calendar. So I'll start by introducing the first pair. So the first month of the Chutasian calendar is called Highwees. And that has its pair with the last month of the Chutasian year, which is called Sonwison. And so let's break down a bit what Highwees means. And so these names of the month, they come from Proto-Chutalandian, so it's a dialect, a former dialect of Chutaland. And the names are mostly made up of combined words. And you'll notice as we get further through the months, there are patterns that emerge. So let me try to teach some of this to you. So Highwees is made up of 2 words. The end of the word, wheeze, refers to Little Weasel. So Little Weasel is a constellation that is visible in the Chutasian night sky at the beginning of the Chutasian year. So as you may have gathered, the Chutasians are not particularly into astronomy. They have always the intention of kind of looking up at the night sky, but then they always fall asleep, and so they didn't really get very far with it. And so the knowledge that they do have about the night sky is kind of passed to them from kind of, well, for instance, the Arisako Misto men gave them, well, this knowledge about the Little Weasel constellation. Now, the more observant amongst you, I don't know if anyone has thought of this, but Chutasia is a world filled with Chutasian hedgehogs. So how can they have a constellation which is called Little Weasel? Surely this means nothing in a world where you've only ever seen hedgehogs. Now, I would say that this is a pretty good indicator then that this knowledge about the Little Weasel constellation hasn't originated from Chutasia. Like, they're calling it Little Weasel, but a lot of them, they don't realize that weasel is an animal. So I would guess that this name, Little Weasel, comes from one of the neighboring realms, perhaps where weasels do live. I also kind of intuitively think if it's called Little Weasel, does this mean that there's a big weasel? So that maybe in the place where this originated from, they're aware of another constellation, which is called Big Weasel. But in Chutasia, they just call it Little Weasel. So the end of that month, wheeze, means Little Weasel, and as I said, this is a constellation which is visible right at the beginning of the year. And when the Eriziko-Misto men came over to Chutaland, they pointed out this constellation in the sky. They said, look, it's the Little Weasel. And because the Chutalandians had never really looked at the sky much before, they weren't sure if it was like new or not. And a lot of them believed that the Eriziko-Misto men had created these lights in the sky for them as some sort of like gift or, a gift or offering to them. And so a lot of them were not always totally sure that when it was high wheeze, when it became the beginning of the year again, would they actually see the Little Weasel again? Was it relating to whether the Eriziko-Misto men were pleased with them? The Eriziko-Misto men, they do have a link to the religion and the gods that are believed in Chutaland. So some of them interpret it as like, if the gods turn against us, we won't see the constellation. And there's a lot of layers. I won't get into all of this. But basically, high wheeze literally means high means welcoming, bringing, or introducing, and wheeze means little weasel. So it literally means like welcoming little weasel. And if we then look at its mirror, son wison, so wison is just part of little weasel, but instead of son wheeze, they're calling it son wison. I don't know why. Maybe they thought it would sound cool, son wison. I don't know. I'll have to figure out why they put an N on the end. So this prefix son means soon, soon or expecting or awaiting. So what they're saying at the end of the year is that soon we're going to see the little weasel when the new year comes, or we're expecting to see the little weasel. So actually in the early days when the Chutalandians adopted this calendar, as I said, they were not totally sure if they were going to see the little weasel again. And so if you were saying son wison, expecting the little weasel, it was almost like a declaration of faith, because what you were saying is, I believe I will see the little weasel next month. So the next pair of months that we see in the Chutasian calendar is Lil Plon and Lil Yam. So again, these names are split into two. So what does plon mean? Plon means planting, or planting of a crop. And most of the time this means planting of potatoes, because potatoes are the primary crop that they plant. So when we have Lil Plon, what we mean is Lil means little, small, minor, or secondary. So when you put Lil next to Plon, you get little planting of potatoes. So the Chutasians have two opportunities during their year to plant potatoes. One of them is little and one of them is a bit bigger. And so when the month of Lil Plon comes along, this is the time to plant the small crop of potatoes. So in its mirror, we've got Lil, so you'll know that it's little and is relating to the little planting of potatoes. The other half of the word, which is yam, yam means harvest, but it also can mean yum or delicious or feast. So you're harvesting the potatoes, but the potatoes are also delicious. So what you have is Lil Yam, and Lil Yam is when you would harvest the potatoes that you planted during Lil Plon. And this is a pattern that we will see again in a moment. So the next pair of months is High Hot and By Hot. And so what we have in high hot, so if you remember the high, the prefix high, that means welcoming, bringing, or introducing. And hot means heat or warmth or the sun. So when you're saying high hot, what you mean is it's the beginning of warmer weather. And then you might have intuitively understood that by hot is by means farewell, goodbye, conclusion, or the decline of. So when you have by plus hot, what it is it starts to get colder. So in by hot, you have the longest day of the year, and from that point, it's getting colder. So it's not cold in by hot, but you're past the peak of the heat. So the next pair that we're onto is La Plon and La Yam. And you might be able to intuitively understand this, but I will explain it. So again, we have plon, which means planting, in this case, planting of potatoes. But instead of lil plon, little planting of potatoes, we have la plon. And la means large, major, primary, or main. So in this case, la plon is when you do your big planting of potatoes. And then later on in the year, you have La Yam, which would be the large harvest of potatoes, or the large delicious, the large yumminess, because this is when you would harvest the potatoes that you planted during La Plan. So now we're on to the final pair, and this final pair is kind of feast days or kind of remembering key events in the Chutalandian history. So the 6th month of the year is called Hedgeplan. So we know this word plon means planting, and normally it means planting potatoes. But in this case, it's planting used in a bit more of a poetic way, as we will see. So the prefix hedge in this case refers to the name Hedgerton. Now you might know that Chutney's name is Chutnita spikerina Hedgerton. So in this case, Hedgerton is referring to the monarch. So it means monarch. And so when we have planting plus monarch, what it is they're remembering is the crowning of a monarch. So if you remember from the previous video, it's okay if not, I'm going to give you a recap. The first king of Chutaland was called Spikebert, and his daughter, Spikerina, becomes the first queen of Chutaland eventually when she takes the throne. We did say previously that King Spikebert, although he's considered the first king of Chutaland, he didn't have a proper crowning ceremony, and he didn't really ever call himself king. And so Queen Spikerina is really the first kind of big official monarch, and she does have a crowning ceremony, and that's what this month of the year is talking about, the planting of the monarch, Hedgeplan. And during Hedgeplan, there's also a lot of feasting, although they can't do too much feasting because they only have the little harvest of potatoes from the previous month, Lil Yam. And so they have a feast, but it's more of a modest feast, I suppose. So the month that mirrors with that one is called Zplan. So Zplan is probably the most complicated month to explain. So Zplan is the month that the Arizico-Misto men arrived in Chutaland. And this month was originally called Ariziplan, but of course that's a bit, it's a bit difficult to say, Ariziplan. But we can see that's actually the only month that's made up of kind of like three nuggets. I don't know the proper terminology for like describing etymology of words, but it's made up of these 3 word nuggets. You might recognize this middle word, which is high meaning welcoming or bringing. And if you remember something like Hi Wheeze, that's the welcoming of the little weasel. If you instead put hi after the word, so if it was called wheeze high, that would put it in the past tense. So hi wheeze is welcoming the weasel, wheeze high would be the weasel was welcomed. So in this case, Arizico refers to the Arizico-Misto men, and because hi is following the Arizico-Misto men, it's in past tense, so it's the Arizico-Misto men were welcomed. And then we look at the second part, which is hi plon. So we know that plon means planting and hi means welcoming. So if you put all of it together, what it means is the Arizico-Misto men were welcomed bringing planting. And so, in this planting of potatoes. So what they're really trying to get across is in this month, the Arizico-Misto men arrived and they brought with them the knowledge of planting potatoes. Okay, so it's a bit of a complicated one, and eventually that becomes shortened to be Zplan. So if I read out all of the months of the year, we have Highwees, Lilplon, High Hot, Larplon, Lilyam, Hedgeplon, By Hot, Layam, Zplon, Sonwison. And that is the Chutasian calendar. So in the next video, I'm going to be talking a bit about the Chutalandian creation myth. And by talking about them in terms of like how did the Chutalandians believe that their island came into being. And part of that also talks about the Arisco Misto men. And we can understand a bit more about, okay, so these teachers and spiritual leaders and craftsmen came from Arisco. They came to Chutaland. There were not that many of them. We only have the names of about 5 of them. And yet they were able to have such a massive impact on Chutalandian society. How did they do this? Why did they do this? What did the natives think of the Arisco Misto men? And that will be partly covered when we talk about the creation myth of Chutaland. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you all next time. Bye bye.